Yes, and it's interesting because I am much more relaxed by scheduling everything in advance, and I work way out from my deadlines, whereas you like to work right up to a deadline. So that's interesting. But yes, the dictation, there were pros and cons, right? Because we paid for quite a lot of transcription. It was just easier to get a human to do that. But then it was quite a lot of editing. So when you were editing the stuff, what did you feel? Did you rewrite a lot of it? Did it help? I mean, I go back and forwards on it. I feel like it did keep our voices quite well, but equally I did have to rewrite quite a lot.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 212 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Joanna Penn about co-authoring The Relaxed Author with her. Now, Joanna Penn writes nonfiction for authors and is an award-nominated USA Today best-selling thriller and dark fantasy author under J.F. Penn. She's a podcaster, a creative entrepreneur, and an international professional speaker. She is well known and beloved by the indie author community. She is the host of the Creative Penn podcast. She is a dear friend and someone I respect and admire so much. And I'm honored that I've known her for so long that I get to call her a friend and a colleague, and also so thrilled and honored that I got to co-write The Relaxed Author with her. And so this is a conversation we recorded almost about a week before the launch of The Relaxed Author on September 18th. Now, I'm recording this on September 23rd, so the book came out, I can't do the math, a few days ago. The book came out on Saturday, September 18th. It's now Thursday, September 23rd. You do the math in your head because you're smarter than I am. And because I can't, my fingers are busy on the keyboard right now. I can't use them for counting. But this is a conversation that we recorded. So it's going out on my podcast for Friday, September 24th. It's going on Joanna's podcast for Monday, September 27th. So you'll be listening to the same interview. I know Jo edited her clips. I edited mine. We may have edited them slightly differently, but it's the same core conversation. What I also did, and it'll be included in the show notes, is I just posted the sort of less edited version of the full interview on YouTube, so you can see us looking at each other and smiling and grinning. You can even see some blooper stuff that we cut out. You can see the clips where Joanna does her introduction for her podcast, then I do my introduction for my podcast. But then obviously that's some of the things that we tweaked and cut in the audio that you're going to hear, as well as a point in the conversation where my cell phone suddenly went off because I forgot to turn it off. But anyway, that's on the video, and there'll be a link to that in the show notes. But it is a fascinating conversation because I think it's a unique way that the two of us went about writing the book together. It was a new experience for both of us. We talk about the logistics of that process. We talk about some of the challenges and even the frustrations that we had working on this book together. Yes, we respect and admire one another, and we like each other, and we like working with each other. But of course, there were things that I did that frustrated Joanna, and there were things that Joanna did that frustrated me. And so we talk about those things a little bit, but that's just part of it. And the other thing, the most important thing, I think, when people see the title The Relaxed Author, they think, oh, it's a misnomer. How could you be a relaxed author? That's impossible. And the reality is that neither Jo and I are actually, fully relaxed. There are things that stress us out. And we talk about that in the book, and we talk about that in the podcast. But that's coming up later in this episode. First, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Now, Findaway Voices is the platform that Joanna and I used for the audiobook version of The Relaxed Author. Here's how we did the audiobook version in a nutshell. After the book was written and edited, etc., Joanna recorded her parts, I recorded mine, we shared the files on a Dropbox folder, and then I took all of those files and I stitched them together. I initially used Audacity to stitch the audio files together. I exported them from there. And then, following the very awesome advice from Wesley, who is the chief engineer for Findaway Voices, he has some very helpful video and blog content pieces from Findaway Voices to help you master your file professionally. And I used Adobe Audition for the final mastering phases and got all the files together, mastered them, and then Joanna used her account to publish through Findaway Voices. And that's the beauty of Findaway Voices, is if this was a book where we were looking for a professional narrator, we could have used Findaway Voices to find a professional narrator, but we managed to, thanks to Wesley and Findaway Voices showing you how to do it. If you have the time and inclination to do it yourself, we just loaded the files ourselves. I think there were 2 files we got back from them where there was an issue with part of the file. So I had to go in and fix that and adjust that, and it was fine. They've since been approved as of today, as I'm recording this on the 23rd of September. It's at most of all the major places in terms of, Audible and Kobo and Google and Apple, and I haven't seen it on Nook yet, but it's at most of the major places and should be available to the library system. So you can request this audiobook through your local library. It may not be available immediately, so if you're listening to this right on the 24th of September, you may have to wait, but you can get this book. It's available in audiobook as well as all the other formats. But we used Findaway Voices because it could get the book out into the largest network of more than 43 retail and library systems. Nice and easy. And if you want to see how you can leverage Findaway Voices as an author, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. And now time for comments from recent episodes. Lynn left a comment on episode 203. This was my July 30th, 2021 podcast episode called A Rant on Unprofessional Author Behavior, where I went off on some unprofessional author behavior that really annoyed the crap out of me as a book industry professional. Now, Lynn's comment, she said, I couldn't agree more, Mark. As an editor and publisher, I see equally bad behavior from authors who ignore submission guidelines, sending manuscripts significantly over/under requested word count. Stories that utterly and completely miss the requested theme/topic for the project, whose submissions have to be fished out of junk mail folders because they couldn't be bothered to address them as requested, and more. I've gone on more than a few rants about them myself, and while I don't have a photographic memory, I often remember those troublemakers, and not kindly, when they submit to another project. It's not that difficult to be a professional, especially if you want to be treated like a professional in a global industry like ours. Well, thank you so much for that, Lynn. Now, I know Lynn edits numerous anthologies and has open submissions for some of the anthologies that she edits. She also solicits stories from pro writers that she knows, so you're in really good competition. There's very limited spaces. And as an editor, and I've been an editor of anthologies as well, it's so easy for an editor to know that it's not going to be quality, because if a writer can't pay attention to basic guideline instructions, how much are they paying attention to the quality of their story? They almost go hand in hand. And even if they don't go hand in hand, do you want the potential editor who may be offering you money for this project or whatever terms are being used for the publication? Do you really want to take that chance? So thank you so much for that comment, Lynn. I feel you. Oh boy, do I ever feel you. Makes me think I should do an episode on submissions and things like that, because I often don't talk a lot about those more traditional side of publishing. and what it's like. So that would be interesting to bring maybe you and some other folks who have been editors on a panel discussion about such topics. But it's so funny that episode 203, which I was tempted to not even share. I just wanted to kind of, get it off my chest. I ended up censoring it a bit, editing it down a little bit, making it a little bit more clean for prime time and putting it out. And I'm glad I did that. Thanks to my awesome patrons who recommended that, which is great because I think it's giving food for thought. And that's what this podcast is about. So, as mentioned, if you want to leave a comment on any episode of the podcast, you can do so over for the show notes over at starkreflections.ca. You can email me, mark@markleslie.ca. You can at me on Twitter. I'm at Mark Leslie. And a huge thank you to those people who leave comments. The comments are something that really fire me up as a podcast host, because it means I know there are listeners because I can see the stats of the downloads every week, and they keep growing and growing and growing, and even the downloads of all the backlist episodes. So I know people are out there listening, and thank you for listening to the podcast. But it's those occasional comments that I get that really get me fired up and motivated and inspired to keep doing the podcast. So you can support this podcast by leaving comments, by sharing comments, by messaging me, letting me know what you're thinking. Share your own reflections. You are a reflective author after all. And also a huge thank you to my patrons who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. Patrons get access to additional audio content, including my reflections on other podcasts, which tend to be very short, more like 15-minute episodes where I share a clip of something really cool or something that made me think of something, made me want to reflect as I listened to something really bright and brilliant. So, for example, last week, I was listening to the Writers Inc. podcast with Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon and J.D. Barker, and they were talking to Hugh Howey. And I just reflected on something that Hugh said in that podcast. And that's kind of what the Stark Reflections on Other podcasts is. So my patrons get access to additional content like that. Like I said, you can check it out over at patreon.com/starkreflections. But that is it for comments. I'm going to forego personal update because I want to get this episode edited and completed. And I want to do it before Liz gets home for dinner so I can get something nice ready for dinner. We often collaborate on dinner together, just the way Joanna and I collaborated on this book. So just imagine that wonderful collaborative spirit happening as I segue with a little bit of an audio bumper over on to this conversation with Joanna Penn. This is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, host of Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing, and I'm honored to have Joanna Penn on the show with me today. Joanna is not only a professional speaker, a podcaster, she is a thriller author, an authorpreneur, and the host of an additional podcast, which is the Books and Travel podcast, because it's one of her great passions in life. And Joanna is the co-author of The Relaxed Author. Welcome, Jo.
Oh, it's great to talk to you, Mark.
It's wonderful to chat with you as well.
Right. So here we are. Finally, we both have the book, The Relaxed Author, and it's actually very pretty. I'm quite pleased with it. Are you happy?
Oh,
with
you know what? When Liz saw it, because she hadn't seen anything, she just heard me talking about I'm working on this book with Jo. And when she saw it, she went, "Oh my God, that is so gorgeous. That is your cover designer did such a brilliant job. Just absolutely gorgeous." And even come on, like even the interior design, when you look at it, is I'm just looking at the section breaks, right? So you get the section breaks and you got the sexy image right in there too, right? So for all the different parts of the book.
Good. Well, I'm glad you like it, because I feel like it's difficult with co-writing. Well, there's lots of difficulties. We'll get into that. But let's go back to the beginning. How did we even come up with the idea for this book? I mean, it's not like we had other things going on and we were like, oh, here's a surprise book. So when did we come up with that, and why did we go forward with it?
So was it back in March? Is it early March of this year, of 2021, that I was being interviewed on your podcast? Maybe the episode aired in March, or Was it April? I'm trying to remember how far back it was.
It was a wide for the win. You came on to talk about wide for the win, basically. And I think we said, yes, going wide makes us more relaxed. And we started to laugh about how we were relaxed authors. And then we got so many emails about it.
Yeah.
And so I emailed you and said, hey, should we do the relaxed author? So when I did email you and ask you, you already had a lot of books planned for this year. So what were your feelings when I asked you that? And what are some of the people, I guess, listening when we're offered a project or we come up with a project? When should we say no? When should we go for it?
Well, that's one of our chapters in the book, right? We talk about the importance of saying no, because there's so many great ideas you have to say no to, and so many opportunities you may, like, for example, you are very selective in not just going and speaking anywhere, right? It has to be something, right? Maybe you can tie in, well, post or pre-pandemic travel to a place because you want to research it for a novel or something like that. But what was funny is we joked about it. I think I remember saying, yeah, we could have some like easy listening music and smoking jackets and just call chill and relax. But your listeners responded in a big way saying, oh my God, I need that book. And it really, I had a lot of projects already. I had 4 other book projects between then and the end of the year that I had on my plate. I don't always get all of them done. Some of them are up for pre-order already, which causes stress, but also causes me to work better at it, which is part of how I work. But I think what happened is when that came and you emailed me, I had already been chewing on it because I saw those comments on Twitter and went, yeah, you know what? I think a book like that would be needed. Wouldn't that be helpful? But here's the thing, and I want to throw this question back at you, Joe, because I think we agreed on it. Actually, I'll let you answer that question as well. So I immediately thought, oh my God, this is a brilliant idea. We have to do this book. So I was in, 100%. Let's do this. How about you? How did you reply to that?
Well, it was funny because I was also feeling this is a necessary topic before we even came up with it. And I guess we should say that as well. There's a lot of stress in the author community. It's not just about the pandemic. It's also about what we don't want the indie movement to become. We don't want people to be burned out writing a book a month. And of course, if you do write a book a month, brilliant, go for it. If you love it and that's the way you work, and there are a small percentage of people for whom that does work. But for a lot of people, authors are losing sight of the love of why they do this and are getting stressed around publishing, around marketing, around business. And there's just a lot of angst. And we did a survey as part of this and we kind of asked, what are you stressed about? And it was literally everything.
Oh my God, it was and then there were things that I forgot that I was stressed out about, that I was reminded, oh yeah, that stresses me out too, when I saw the survey.
Yeah, but and then it's funny because actually I'd had almost said I'm never going to co-write a book again. Because I do find it quite difficult, and we'll come to the challenges in a minute. But the other thing we should say about our relationship is that we've known each other for over a decade now, online, and we're going to have some photos in the show notes. There'll be some photos of us basically when we first met in person. I think it was 2013 at London Book Fair. And then there was Toronto, we hung out, Charleston and Florida and all these different places over the years. Not everything has, like, our karaoke shall remain forever without a photo, but I
wonder if anyone did take photos of that, or hopefully no video.
No, but I think we sang Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer, together.
We did. That was very fun. Did it as a duet. That was just remarkable creativity from the two of us right there, with a little bit of alcohol.
Exactly. But I guess the point is that because we've known each other personally, but also professionally now for so long, that I felt like, well, we know each other well enough, or I thought we did before, and we'll get into some of the things that surprised us both, but I felt like, yes, I can trust you. And this is a tip for co-writing, isn't it? I mean, trust is so important. If you don't actually trust the person you're working with, both creatively and financially, you're going to struggle. So I don't know how anyone could co-write with a complete stranger. I mean, I've co-written now with a number of people. You do a lot more collaboration than me, actually. But what do you think are some tips for making sure it's the right partnership to even agree with at the beginning?
Yeah, well, I mean, trust is a major factor because I mean, you get this a lot, I'm sure. People have, well, this is a common thing for writers. Hey, you're a writer. I have an idea. Why don't I give you my idea and we'll collaborate? You meaning you do all the writing because that's what you do, and I have ideas. That's so cute. But I have co-written with a number of people, and yeah, you're right. It was a thing I never even thought about, but it was, yeah. Do I trust this person to actually uphold their end? And obviously there was no question about you because we've had such a long-standing relationship, professional, personal relationship. We know each other. It's just been playing catch up and our chats about the industry. We're so aligned in so many of the ways that we think and feel about the industry in terms of long-term wanting to support authors and wanting to help people become better at what they do and feel better about what they do. And yet, and you alluded to this earlier, and yet we did discover that we have differences of the way we approach work, and it was intriguing that we fell into this really interesting set of roles that we both felt really comfortable in. So had, for example, I taken over the project management of this, that would have stressed you out remarkably. Right. It would have stressed me out too to try to do that. So can we talk a little bit about how we ended up approaching this, and then realizing, oh yeah, we are actually a different in our approach, not just in our responses to the various questions that came up too.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about that. I mean, I'm partly an independent author because I'm a control freak, and we all are to an extent, but I think possibly because I spent 13 years of consulting, possibly because it's just my personality type, but I do like to be in control. And you were very good because you essentially let me be in control, and I have been telling you what to do, but luckily we both know what to do, so it's not like I need to explain what these things are. Right. But we should say up front, we do have a contract between us, even though we're friends, we have a contract because this is a joint copyright that will, you're with Liz, I'm with Jonathan, but our marriages don't last as long as copyright. Actually, we should say that in our document we talked about what would happen if either of us died. I mean, we even went that far, and I think that's important too, even if your friends have an agreement. So that was important. And then I did take the sort of primary organizational role and did, and took the publisher role. So the book is published under Curl Up Press. It's my cover design and my branding rather than yours. So how did you find, I mean, let's just be brutally honest, how did you find my project management? And you're welcome to say whatever you like.
So I, as you know, I work to deadline. I'm very, very, when I have a deadline, when I have a commitment, when I know I need to get something done by a certain date, that is what motivates me. That's what kicks the muse into gear. That's what gets things. It's like, listen, there is no wishy-washiness here. You got to get it done. And so having you take that role relieved a bit of stress that I have when I'm publishing independently. I have certain projects that have been on the back burners for years because, like, yeah, I'll get to it one day. But knowing that somebody that I respect and admire and trusts me in the same way, is relying on me, that motivates me to get the job done, to make sure I'm not just doing it because I need to get it done. I'm doing it because I don't want to let Joanna down, right? So that was an important element of it. And the fact that you did that, it made sense for you to do it under Curl Up Press. Curl Up Press, for example, is a, well, let's be honest. I'm not gonna, there's no surprise here. Joanna Penn is a much larger, more significant, world-renowned brand, and so is Curl Up Press in terms of the respect and admiration that and what you've done in the author community. What is this, the 13th book or the 15th book?
Oh, goodness knows at this point.
Yeah, I mean it's. So I only have, as of the time we started to write on this, I only had 4 books in my Stark Publishing Solutions series, books for writers, similar kind of feel. And then, of course, I had this other book in the works on the side that I was already planning when we discussed this. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm doing 2 books for writers this year. And I think having you in charge of that took a lot of the stress off of me. I actually felt bad that you were doing the extra work, you know what I mean? Like, because the onus is on you. But I think but I think you fell into that role and felt it more comfortable. Like, okay, now I know what's going on. I've got everything outlined. And the way that you structured things, the way that we shared things was great. Like, because we still had to figure out, okay, so we had the contract, we had to figure out who's publishing and what were the logistics, how are we going to deal with the expenses, how are we going to deal with when the money comes in. Now, obviously, you're using Draft2Digital for a significant chunk of it in terms of the automatic royalty split, which means some of the payments are just going to come straight to me and straight to you, and we don't have to worry about it. But then other ones will be, how are we going to share the files and the formatting and stuff? So I remember a discussion we had. I've always defaulted to my personal use of eBooks with a small e and a capital B. And so when we were going through each other's notes and the proofreading, I was like, well, we need to discuss these things. But again, it's curl up press, and we needed to stick to, so it gave us a very clear answer. Not, it wasn't just us butting heads. It was a clear answer. No, this is the style guide for curl up press. And that's important. I mean, one of the editors I work with, she does an amazing job of provides a style guide that you can use in your series, which is just absolutely phenomenal. I was like, no, this is the style guide for curl up press, so I'm going to stick with it. That's just, when I work with traditional publishers too, it was no different. This is the way they want it done, so this is the way I'm going to do it. It's professional.
Yeah, I think just coming back, you mentioned there we're using Draft2Digital. We're using that for the ebook. So we're using the payment splitting for the ebook, but we're still selling the ebook directly through my payhip.com/the creative pen. And then we're doing the print books separately through Kindle, through Amazon KDP Print and through Ingram Spark. And with the audiobook, we're wide with audio as well. So we're basically selling in every format on every platform, as is our principle. But as you said, Draft2Digital does offer the payment splitting. So we are using that. But it's so funny because on the one hand, I really appreciate it because, yes, you get money that is directly split and it's great for co-writing. But equally, I do feel that lack of control because I can't see that book on my other platforms. Like when I log into Amazon or
that's
Kobo,
right. Yeah, the sales is all coming through one platform. Yeah.
Yes, and that's the first time that this has happened to me because I've only ever used Draft2Digital for my kind of smaller platforms.
Right.
So that's been quite
caused stress for you.
Yes, it has caused stress for me, and I feel like maybe it will cause ongoing stress. But equally, I'm really glad we did it because I wanted to try it, and I do think one of the biggest overheads of co-writing is paying people. Not the first couple of months because there's decent money, but realistically, I mean, I basically will pay monthly for the first couple of months and then move to a sort of 3 month or even 6 months, depending on how long it's been, because it's not worth the time to, especially when you're wide, because
18 cents, Amazon Mexico, right? Or whatever.
I just don't want to deal with that. So yes, so we did that. Let's go back to the actual writing process, because what I discovered, it surprised me so much, is that you use Microsoft Word. You don't use Scrivener. And I was like, what? Sorry, you don't use Scrivener? What is going on with you? And so I found that really weird that you didn't use Scrivener and that I use Scrivener and I use it to organize. So this was another thing right up front. You were like, here's a spreadsheet with a table of contents. And I'm like, I don't do that. It emerges. My table of contents emerges from the writing. And so how was that for you? The writing process we're quite different in that. I don't outline it at first.
Yes, it's funny. Well, I don't outline either, especially in fiction, but the nonfiction's a little bit different. But see, I thought you would have been so excited to have a spreadsheet because I'm like, oh, cool, because she's organized and I'm disorganized. So the fact that I have a spreadsheet is like, oh my God, Mark actually does spreadsheets. So that's how I've done all of my other collaborations. Either Google Sheets is probably the easiest way, where we just need to decide how we're going to, because typically we would divide up the chapters and say, okay, I'm going to do research and write this chapter. You're going to do this one. Maybe we co-write some of them, but most of the time we just go off and do our things and then edit each other's work. And that's how we start before sending it to the publisher. Because I think almost all of my other collaborations, the majority of them were with a traditional publisher. So we each had to sign a contract with the publisher. And I kind of led it because I was the one who had been experienced with that publisher and had other books with them. And so what I often do is I'll create a spreadsheet and what I think is the outline. I think we're going to do this. And as I'm writing chapters, I go in and go, no, I need to do another. And so I use that. And I know you use Scrivener in that way, where you organize. Now, I tried Scrivener, and I had some challenges with once it gets from Scrivener to Word, because a lot of the books I had been working on, either the editors I worked with independently or the editors of the publishing houses required a manuscript in Microsoft Word with track changes. And so for me, it was less stressful to go and use a different platform and then have to translate it and then just go to Word. And so for the most part, yeah, I just use Word and Excel if it's on my own, like on my own desktop, or a Google Doc if it's a collaboration. But I think what I like about that is, but you were able to do the same thing. You just translated Scrivener to a format in a Dropbox folder that I could go in and see where we were.
Yes, well, let's say this was a big decision because, again, in the books we've co-written before, the two authors meld, like mind meld, or in the edits, become, or as you say, either write separate chapters or collaborate within a chapter. And what we've done, and this, we went back and forwards on this, but what we've done is every chapter has you writing a section and me writing a section. So that was, and I'm really happy we did that now. The audio, but one of the reasons was for the audiobook, and the audiobook is brilliant. I've really enjoyed listening to it because I don't listen to my bits, I've listened to your bits. But it's like, well, obviously I've proofed mine, but it was like having your voice and my voice. So for example, we have a chapter called Write What You Love, and I put my thoughts and you put your thoughts in the same chapter, and we do think similarly in many areas, but not all of them. But our separate voices come through both in the written word and the audio. So how do you feel this has turned out? Because I think it's quite unusual, but I actually love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, in most of the other collaborations I did, and I imagine it's the same, there's the meld where even I remember having this discussion with Shayna on Macabre Montreal. We took out any reference to I wherever possible and tried to blend it so you couldn't tell who wrote it. Now, there were obviously distinctions in voices, but we removed any personal stuff, and we talked about us anytime you had to refer to stuff like that. So when we made that decision, I thought, well, that's different. It's interesting. I'm curious to see how it goes. And there was some confusion, especially because of the way, and I think when we talk about the way we wrote this, I thought was also fascinating and interesting. But it reminded me, when I think back to it, and I was looking at the book visually, because I was like, how are we going to represent that this is my voice? And well, we just put Joanna : or Mark : the audiobook is absolutely brilliant because it's very much, especially with the people who know us through, oftentimes I'm usually recognized when someone hears my voice and they go, oh my God, you're Mark Lefebvre. I heard you on Joanna Penn's podcast, right? That's usually the reference most people have. And I think it's like, and we've had this experience where we've sat together on a panel and a question comes out and we each answer it, and they're somewhat complementary and somewhat diverse or different in terms of the way we approach things. And I love the fact that what we're illustrating, which I think is an important message from this book, is that there is no one way to be relaxed, that we all have our own way. And it's kind of like you've got to get into your groove. And so we're going to show you that even though Joe and I agree and have a similar approach, we do have different ways of doing those things or finding relaxation. Because again, we're not relaxed authors. Right. Like, let's be honest, we stress out like anyone else, like it's human. So to pretend, it's like pretending that we don't have imposter syndrome. Like, no, it exists. And so does stress and anxiety. So, but how do you deal with that? How do you curb it? So the voice thing is just absolutely brilliant. Every time I look back at the book, I'm just so proud and so excited that we decided, because it wasn't easy to do that.
No, well, you mentioned the way we did it. So what we did was we did kind of brainstorm a list of topics that we thought, for example, well, we've had obviously the sections on relaxed writing, relaxed publishing, relaxed marketing, relaxed business. And then what we did is we got on Zoom and we talked about it. We did, I think, four separate sessions where we recorded a discussion like this, basically, and then we got the transcript. and then we divided it into you and me, because when I learned that you worked in Microsoft Word, I realized it was going to be very hard for us to co-write in the way that I'm used to doing it. And also because of our different schedules and how busy things are, and also, as you say, the way you write to deadline. I don't think it's time zone, because I did J Thorne, and I've done different time zones. It's more that I am far more, I think I was way ahead of you in terms of I get things done earlier, whereas you kind of work more to deadline. And I was like,
you're like the Flash, and I'm just kind of wandering down the street.
Yeah, you're very relaxed in your timelines, and I'm like, no, I want to get it all done. And actually, because I got COVID in the middle of this, but luckily I'd already finished. I'd basically finished.
Yeah, and that's I think evidence why that works for you really, really well, because what if something happens? No, I've got it done now. So, I got COVID, so I can just be in bed for a week and not do anything.
Several weeks.
Was it several? Yeah. But again, that was interesting. Had that happened to me, it would have been,
Yes, and it's interesting because I am much more relaxed by scheduling everything in advance, and I work way out from my deadlines, whereas you like to work right up to a deadline. Yeah. So that's interesting. But yes, the dictation, there were pros and cons, right? Because we paid for quite a lot of transcription. Yeah. It was just easier to get a human to do that. But then it was quite a lot of editing. So when you were editing the stuff, what did you feel? Did you rewrite a lot of it? Did it help? I mean, I go back and forwards on it. I feel like it did keep our voices quite well, but equally I did have to rewrite quite a lot.
Yeah, I see. I did when I did an author's guide to working with bookstores and libraries. It was based on 2 separate episodes of my podcast, almost an hour each. And I did take the transcription and I started from there, and then I broke things down and then moved them around. So I'd done something like that already. I didn't realize that that's what I had done until we started doing it. And I realized, oh my God, this guy talks too much. It was the first thing. So I had to, get to the bloody point, man. And so that was an important element. But then also I realized I completely missed things in that first pass, like that first draft. I thought of that dialogue as a first draft. So for example, when you talked about writing tools, and you use Scrivener and you use Pro Writing Aid and you use this and you use that, I was like, well, I don't use any tools, I don't think. But then when I was editing that chapter, I was like, you moron, are you kidding? You use tools like crazy. You have, that was one of the other ones, was ScribeCount. When you talked about being stressed that you can't see your sales, oh my God, I love that, because I can go there and I can see, I don't have to log into Amazon and then Kobo and then Draft2Digital and any of the other platforms. I can just go to one place and go, there it is. Took me 5 seconds. I can see where I am because it's pulling it right from each dashboard automatically without, so that was kind of cool. So I realized that was one of the chapters that I think I had 1 paragraph. And then when I sent it back to you, it was like 6 pages.
It was super long. That was actually yours. I mean, that's what's so funny. Some chapters you do go on and I'm really short, and other chapters I go on and you're really short. So that was good.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that. But so how did you find that process? Had you ever done writing in like that sort of original draft in audio first?
I have done some stuff like that, like with J Thorne, for example. And I've also done my own nonfiction with dictation first, with the courses, for example, how to write nonfiction. I did the book and the course at the same time. But what's interesting is because we had a discussion, and when you're having a discussion, you interrupt each other and you're going back and forwards, and the transcription was quite funny because it was full of little asides and private jokes, and we just got off topic, which we do. But what was interesting, yes, but what was good was that then what happened, so just to explain to people, you then got your bit, I got my bit, and I said, by this date, send me your relaxed writing chapters. And then what I did was kind of copy and paste your sections into Scrivener, which was the master document. And then it emerged, to me, the table of contents emerged, and then we realized we had missing things. So we actually ended up writing quite a lot of stuff we hadn't even talked about because it came up in the writing process, which is completely normal. And then, as you say, what happened when the Scrivener was full of both of our first drafts, then I exported it to Word. And then we use Dropbox. We've got a shared Dropbox folder where I put the whole thing and said, this is now yours, Mark. You have the master MS Word document, knock yourself out. So let's talk about the editing process. How did you go through that?
Yeah, that was an intriguing process. I think there were moments where I got to a part that looked like it was attributed to me, and I said, "There's no way I said something that brilliant. That had to have been you," because there. And it was kind of funny because this does happen in co-writing, is you sometimes can't remember if that's something you wrote or your co-author wrote.
But you did write it, by the way.
Yeah,
you often did write it.
But I was like, no, that sounds like Joe. That was really smart. And so, but there are, I think there are elements because of the way when we were interacting, I was talking about something and then you reminded me, interjected and said, what about this? And I'm like, oh my God, yeah. And so the benefit of that dialogue, I think, helped us bring more things to the table. In terms of that process, that was, it was a little bit stressful when we were trying to figure out how, like, I was still worried about the logistics of what it was going to look like in flow and how we were going to divide this up and how readers might, I was worried about all those elements. But then once I got into it, once I sat down and once I started working on it, it started to feel better. And then I was worried about, well, our voices are very different, even though we have a similar perspective. And then I was worried about that. And comparisonitis sets in. I'm like, well, I'm nowhere near as smart as Joe and not as eloquent in terms of it. So I worried about that and then just realized they can skip my parts if they don't like it, right?
Or skip my parts, or skip mine. I think that's important. Yeah.
But I realized that's just part of our being our authentic selves. What I found was intriguing was just how much that comes out. And now, obviously, because I've, again, gone back and proof listened to the audiobook, it is so cool to hear both our voices and to go, yeah, that's neat. That's interesting how we have a different take on the same topic. So what a fascinating process. Did you have any challenges with any of that as we were working through?
Well, I think the editing, obviously what's difficult with editing is we go backwards and forwards, because I did the first main draft, but I didn't touch your word. Well, I did a little bit of organizing or whatever, but I didn't really touch it. And then it came to you did your big edit, gave it back to me. But then what I was basically doing was copying and pasting each chapter back in, because you're editing. Well, we both did an edit whereas we did the audiobook narration, but because you were behind me, because you were busy with other things, you were still on time according to our original plan. But this is very much me. I'll be like, there's my deadline, but I will still do it much earlier to the date
okay.
I had set. So I was a little bit frustrated that you were still sending me changes when I'd basically sent for print design, because I outsource, I work with my designer to do a print design. And I did have to give you like a final deadline and be like, I'm not taking any more for the print. Yeah. We are done. But, obviously we can change. And the audiobook and the print are exactly the same. But the ebook, obviously you can make some changes later because it's much easier to upload another file. Right. But we did, it was like 99.99999% the same. But it was funny because I was like, well, I can't change that now. Enough. Like, stop it already.
Because I was going on a different deadline, and I think the challenge was, I thought, the best way, I know we did have a proofreader look at it, and we had a proof listener as well, which is fantastic. There's always more stuff. Yeah, right? But it was the reading of the chapters, because I've noticed that before, that it's in the read. Oftentimes with my fiction, my final proofreader is Scott Overton, the audiobook narrator, because he finds stuff that everyone missed, which is kind of cool. So I thought, okay, so that's where I found it. And I did. I think I had about 20 or 30 changes of little things like that. Oh, that just sounds dumb when I say it out
and
loud.
It was completely right. It was right. Yeah. It was just the timeline, I guess, I was on. And so in terms of how we did the audiobook, just so people know, so we basically both recorded our sections. And this is where you did some of the heavy lifting, is that I did my section, edited mine. we put all the audio files in the folder, and then you did all the audio editing and mastering. So, but you were comfortable to do that. I mean, but that is some work.
Yeah, that process was, although the great thing about that process, so I could only do the narration of the audiobooks in certain windows, and Liz was home. So that was one of my challenges. Had she been, like, she's at school now, right? So at work. So that'd be fine. I get the most of the day, so long as I don't have other meetings or whatever, I can just block off time. She's home doing construction right below me. I'm in, like, the garage is right below the office. So I had to negotiate with her on when I could do the recordings. The mastering, I could do that at any time, sitting down, headphones in. Like, it doesn't require a quiet space where I have to hang curtains and stuff around my space. I think what I liked was, so I took them, and then I copied them together, and then tried to negotiate the number of seconds between your voice and my voice, the number of seconds between the title. And then we even had to negotiate who reads part one, who reads the chapter title, who reads the quotes, because we have so many quotes from brilliant submissions from the authors who, what was it, 200 authors who
nearly about 230 authors. And as we should say then, yes, we got permission for some people to have their quotes, but we read them, and we had said, oh, well, maybe you read the male quotes and then we were like, no, we're just going to divide it. Whoever hits that does that.
Yeah, if you're at the end of the chapter, then you read that, and if you're at the beginning of the chapter, then you read the quote, if there's a quote that opens the chapter, as well as, so that it was interesting. And then also you read the introduction and conclusion. It made the most sense. It's also, you got to remember, this is Curl Up Press, right? So this is a Joanna Penn book with Mark Leslie LaFave.
Although I think you had more airtime because, as you said, you tend to be more wordy. So I think you actually had more of the number of minutes in total.
Oh, I'm sure I do. I'm also a man, right? So, man, you can't shut me up.
But no, I do. I mean, if people are listening to this, so we would like to recommend the audiobook because we really like it. And that is what I think is interesting about it, is that's the main reason in the end we decided to do it this way, because we both have voice brands, we both have podcast audiences, and it was like, well, how do we retain that? And then working backwards, if we want to do this audio product, how do we put that into the writing product, the written product that reflects how we would do the audio? Because neither of us wanted to just do you read a chapter, I read a chapter, because that doesn't reflect our thoughts. So I'm actually really pleased with it. And I think, to me, this is how I would be happy co-writing again in the future, because I actually feel that I can say, it's very obvious which bits are mine and which bits are yours. And therefore, and it was easier to write that way than it is to try and mind meld or word meld.
Oh, for sure. And that's why it just, neither of us have traveled. I think the last time we saw each other was probably in Vegas, probably just a few months before the pandemic, right? With Dean and Chris at the WMG workshops. I remember like going out for coffee with you and sitting on panels together. And I think I have a selfie. I got to throw that into the mix for the images of the selfie. You were talking on stage and I was trying to take a selfie, and then you looked over and smiled while you were in the middle of talking.
Oh yeah, I want to see that one. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that. And so, but I think that's one of the things I love so much about this book, is because I am an introvert like you. I'm fine on stage, but I do need that time. And I've had more than enough time to decompress by myself. So it was so good because it almost felt like we were hanging out together. And when I listened to the audiobook, it felt like it could have been the two of us sitting on stage answering questions on a panel and smiling at one another and listening and nodding while the other one's speaking, or sometimes going, oh, really? You use Word, right? So I thought that was kind of fascinating, that whole process. So yeah, I am so pleased. As a matter of fact, realizing just how much fun I had doing the audiobook with you has inspired me to go back and do, because I only have one of the audiobooks for my nonfiction for writers. And I realized, well, that's dumb. I actually had a mastermind group that I'm part of, and they said, really? Why don't you have the other audiobooks? Because if people like this, then maybe they're going to want to check them out. And if they're not available in audio, guess what? They're not going to get. So it's inspired me to kind of, to put more work on my plate, but I'm not stressed out about it.
Well, that's good. I think that's really good. So let's just talk about the publishing and marketing. I mean, obviously we've mentioned how we're doing the publishing, and it's under my name. So most of the money is coming into my bank account. Yay. And then I'm obviously going to run away and just spend it all. No, I will be paying you as we go through. But the marketing, so we've already kind of started marketing. Obviously, we've talked about it on our shows and we've started doing things, and we've basically decided that the marketing costs we will just pay for ourselves. So, giving books away, ads, that kind of thing, it just becomes too hard to manage. So we've essentially settled up with production costs, and then going forwards, we'll just do what we do and split it 50%. And again, that's part of trust. Part of the writing and publishing is like, sure, but that's up to when it goes out, and then it's the marketing. And we just both have to trust that we will both market this book. But let's talk about our relaxed approach to launch, because I feel like it's really funny because I'm going away. I'm going to be away on the day it all goes live. So what will you be doing at launch?
I'm going to be away too, actually. I was supposed to be in Nashville for the Career Author Summit with.
Well, so was I originally, but
Jay and Zach, and oh my God, I'm verklempt that I can't be there because I love those guys, and I really wanted to be at the Career Author Summit, and it just was a more intimate group of really fine people. I really enjoy hanging out with, and I'm obviously travel is just too challenging right now to get there in terms of the being isolated and having to quarantine when you get back and stuff. So I'm still trying to work that out. So it was a really tough call. So I was supposed to be there anyways, which would have been cool. Hey, because we were both supposed to be there at one point in time, but then you can't leave. You can't even fly into North America. I'm going up to my mom's to help her get things ready for the fall. So she doesn't even have Wi-Fi. The only way I can get on Wi-Fi is if I jump on a borrowed Wi-Fi from the neighborhood of someone who hasn't locked their Wi-Fi down, which thank goodness for the last 10 years has been fine. Until that neighbor moves away, I'm not going to have Wi-Fi when I go up there. But I'll have to pre-schedule some things. I do have, I have a publicist as well. So Mickey is working on a press release. So he'll be doing some of that where he sends it out to a bunch of different media. And obviously we have, fortunately, you're going to be away. I'm going to be traveling as well. So we can schedule, right? We can schedule social media. We can schedule email blasts. We can schedule things, but I'll probably be, I guess what I think is like, the book launches on September 18th, but whatever. It's not like we're going to be sitting there glued to our dashboards going, oh, how's it selling? How's it selling?
Not at all. And that, I think that's why I wanted to mention. I mean, essentially what we're both going to do is there will be an email that we send to our email lists. We'll put this version of this out on our podcast feeds. We will put the video up on our YouTube channels, and we will schedule some social media links. And that is about it. I mean, you said you're going to do a press release. Doesn't mean anything, to be honest.
No, it's just one of those things you do that may get some things to pick it up.
Might get something, but I never do that. And I think, again, part of this is, and one of our tips, we'll come to a couple of tips in a minute. We're talking about this for quite a while, but one of our tips is to think long term and never to be obsessed actually about the launch. And launch is a very traditional publishing thing, like when the books go into a physical bookstore and then they leave again. Whereas for us, this is an evergreen book, actually. This is very much a more of a mindset book. Yes, it's got practical tips, but we're not obsessing about September the 18th, 2021, I guess. I mean, hopefully people are listening to this in the years to come and find it useful in years to come. And that is a relaxed approach to launch and marketing. And all of our books link to other books, the other books. And so part of it is having a similar brand for nonfiction that will just help selling each other's other books as well. So it becomes part of the ecosystem. But this, I don't think either of us are stressed about launch.
So, it's really funny when you talk about, traditional publishing, it's the launch, it's the first month or two in bookstores, and then that's it. Ironically, you would think the indie author community would say, no, I reject that. But the indie author community in many ways is all stressed about the launch. And okay, on launch day, you got to do this and you got to do that and you got to do that. And it's like, that scares me. I have too much other things to worry about and do. It's like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to write it. It's going to be the best book I can. I'm going to get it out there and we'll see what happens. And again, not see what happens. Obviously, we strategize and we plan things out. But I love the fact that neither one of us is obsessed and freaking out. Right about this. It's kind of like, okay, it's out. I've emailed my people. I let people know I'm going to share it. I'm going to probably share. I think even some outtakes from this video would be hilarious to share. Like when my phone rang and I had to deal with it. It's like, whoops. That kind of stuff I think is, and I think maybe having fun with it too. I even think highlighting how there were moments where we weren't relaxed would kind of be an intriguing way of marketing the relaxed author, is like admitting, we're not always with, yes, we're going to help you, but we're going to admit that we're human too. And
absolutely. And we do say that in the book. It's not like we're all zen and, never stressed. That's not true, obviously. But what's so interesting, I think this has become even more clear to me because of having COVID, and I really was in bed for 2 weeks, and then after the 2 weeks I was able to do a little more each day, but it was at least a month, kind of 5 weeks of just being well below my capacity. And what I realized is, okay, I can only do one thing a day with the amount of energy I have. And when I thought about the principles that we've included, and in fact, I made probably more money that month than I have other months of the year, because I was able to pull some levers within my business that meant I could essentially, well, it wasn't really relaxing, but I didn't have to work. And that was I haven't done that like ever. I'm hardly ever sick, really not very sick. Yeah. Yes, I take some breaks and, holiday occasionally, but it felt like, oh my goodness, I actually can be more relaxed about my author business at this point because of the principles that we've gone through. So let's just both pick, I guess. Well, we've talked about some, but I wanted to say, I think we both said the long-term mindset is very important, both for the business, but also the writing. And to come back and say, I still want to be doing this. I don't want to burn out. I don't want to give up writing. I want to have the long-term view. That is one of the principles that, is important to both of us. And partly we wrote this because you've been doing this 20 plus years. And I've been doing this, I've been full-time for over a decade. I've been writing for 15 years. So we've seen people crash out because they're so stressed they can't do it anymore, whereas we're still here.
Yeah, yay. Look at us go.
We're still here, but I think the practices that we talk about help us stay. Like, we're still here because we have these practices, rather than the sort of super stressed way. You can be stressed for a short amount of time as you hit a deadline, but you cannot be stressed all the time, or you will give up and just get a normal job, right?
Yeah, like that's like a mental breakdown. That is it's not good. Even good stress, even happy stress, right? Even like, hey, it's number one, or hey, we're doing whatever. I know it sounds silly, but it's like having that high all the time is not necessarily a good thing. So I think one of the things I loved about this process is there were so many things that we pulled out of ourselves for this book that I didn't realize until we had the conversation and started thinking about it. And it's only after thinking about it that I reminded myself some of the things I'd forgotten along the way. And that was just such it's funny, like books in many ways, fiction or nonfiction, are therapeutic for me. It's a story I have to tell, and I'm not going to feel good until I tell the story, or I need to exercise these demons, or I need to express this feeling I have. And this book, in a very significant way, was therapeutic for me. I'm so glad we did it, because as I was, and again, just because lately, when we got stuff back from the proofreader, and I went back and I was listening in again with the proofreader's notes, which is fantastic, by the way, a great guy. And that just really brought it home to me in a way that I don't think I've had that experience on previous either collaborations or even previous books that I've written, because of the multi-layered way we had to go back and forth. I couldn't just make a decision. For example, I couldn't just make a decision. I had to make the decision with my co-author in turn, right? Because of the structure or whatever. So yeah, long-term thinking and just remembering the things you learned along the way, like pausing to actually acknowledge some of those things, because we forget about those things, and we don't take the time to appreciate those experiences we've had.
Yeah, and then I guess we should say, like, both of us obviously have other books for authors, and you could say that all of the things we've said are in all of our books in some way.
Yeah.
I feel like the difference here is that we have brought it all together under the sort of relaxed angle. So for example, under relaxed marketing, we're not going to tell you how to do anything. We're talking more about the attitude towards it and some of the decisions we've made. I also do want to say that we have acknowledged, for example, we've said publish wide or don't. We're not saying, like, because it's like sometimes it is more relaxing to be exclusive. We absolutely know that. So I want people to realize that I think we're quite inclusive in the way that we're doing. Or, for example, social media, choose social media that works for you, or don't do it at all.
Exactly, because if it doesn't work for you, then why would you? I love that inclusivity. And it's kind of funny you mentioned that, because when I was looking at this book, there's so many elements of things I've already said on my podcast, you've said on your podcast, shared in books, said when you're being interviewed anywhere. And ironically, like, none of the stuff that I put in the books is not stuff that I don't already give to the community anyways. The whole idea is, like, we're collecting it and outlining it in a very packaged way that's concise, so you don't have to scramble to go find all these bits and pieces,
Exactly.
which should be more relaxed.
Exactly. So I guess as we come to the end of this, we really hope this helps, because I mean, this isn't pandemic about the pandemic, but the pandemic has added a lot of stress for people, and we hope that, like, your author life should not be the stressful bit. Your writing should be where you go for comfort and solace and working things out. And your writing should be where you run to when you are stressed. And it shouldn't be the thing that stresses you out. And any stress you do have should be short term. So we really hope that The Relaxed Author is going to help you. You can find it on all your favorite platforms, in all your favorite formats. And if you don't, then you should just email one of us and we will make sure it gets there. You can also buy the ebook and audiobook direct at payhip.com/The Creative Pen. And of course, we make more money if you buy direct from us. So go ahead and do that. But is there anything else you wanted to say as we wind up, Mark?
No, I just want to remind authors of the reason what probably drew them into writing in the first place was passion and the enthusiasm and excitement. And I'm hoping that they can find, like we have found and rediscovered, they can rekindle that passion, that enthusiasm for what drew them to storytelling and writing in the first place. And hopefully this book will help them. So thank you, Joanna, for this amazing experience of getting to write this book with you.
Oh, and thanks so much for your time today, Mark. That was great.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation that Joanna Penn and I had about working on The Relaxed Author together. I'm going to reflect quickly on just sort of the experience of being able to write a book with somebody that I respect so much and regard so highly. I mentioned earlier that it was an honor to write a book with Joanna, but I mean, it's still very much imposter syndrome when I think that I actually got to co-author a book with the Joanna Penn. I got to karaoke with her. I get to hang out with her. I've gotten to hang out with her on, multiple continents and sit on stage interview her on stage, sit beside her on panels. I'm so lucky in my author career that I've had the opportunity to collaborate with my heroes. And Joanna Penn is a hero. She's a hero to me and thousands of other authors out there. I've gotten to hang out and do the same sort of thing with so many of my author heroes that I'm very lucky. I'm very privileged. I do recognize that. But it was also, on top of the honor and the privilege, it was a lot of work. But I love the way that we got to approach this, because Joe and I learned new things about the process of collaboration. Neither one of us have collaborated like this before, so that was a great experience for me. And also even the way that we wrote the book is an experience I've never had before, so I can take that with me and use that potentially in other collaborations or in other solo projects. We also learned so much about one another because we had never collaborated in this manner before. And so there were surprising things that we hadn't expected but found. And I think when I step away from a project like this, and I know this is a long-term project, we're in the height of the first week that the book has been released, and we're writing all the bestseller lists, and we're getting all excited about the volume of sales that are happening. That's just a small part of the whole process, because I'm going to be able to look back at this book years later and be so proud that I got to work with somebody I respect so much, and we got to collaborate on something that can help authors. And I love that. I'm so proud of the work that I get to do. And I guess I feel that, obviously I feel that pride for every book that I work on, especially the nonfiction ones where there's a very specific, it's not like fiction where it's escape and people are going to enjoy it. But this is something that's going to help them, like, Wide for the Wind is going to help them on mindset or working with bookstores and libraries, or, just looking for ways to become a relaxed author. What I'm more interested in, rather than my own reflections, is I'm interested in your reflections on relaxed author. Are there things that you find stressful, and how do you overcome them? Are there things that you haven't figured out how to approach in a more relaxed way? Or does the thought of relaxing and being more relaxed, does that stress you out? For example, Joanna, mentioned that she was kind of stressed out or a little bit anxious that she can't see the sales in the same way that she normally would, which is directly on the dashboards. Whereas I'm the opposite. I go, yeah, I can go to the different dashboards, but God, do I ever love ScribeCount, because I can go to a single place and instantly see all my sales, at least all my sales instantly from most of the self-published platforms out there. Not all of them yet, but most of them. The majority of the major ones are there. So there are still a few that aren't showing up, but that's fine. They'll get there. But see, I love the convenience of that single dashboard, and even the collaborations I've done through Draft2Digital. I'm more than happy to have them take charge of splitting out the money, because she's doing that for our self-pub sales. I'm not selling this book directly. I'm driving people to Joanna's website so they can buy it from her, and that way it's easier that all the money for the direct sales, as well as for the other formats like audio and print, etc., are going to Jo. She's going to have to do that extra work. She's happy doing that work, but she's going to have to do that extra work. Whereas me, I go, yeah, I'd rather not have to deal with that at all. But in any case, I am curious to think about your own reflections. Was there something in the conversation that surprised you? Was there something that made you want to reflect? Go ahead and leave comments over at starkreflections.ca for episode 212. But that's it for my post-conversation, post-interview reflections and Mark babble, as we may want to call it. I hope you found this podcast interesting. If you want to support this podcast, leave a comment. Oh my God, that helps. Feel free to leave a review over on the podcatcher of your choice, or better yet, please share this podcast with a friend that you think would find value in the podcast, because you'll be doing me a favor, you'll be doing them a favor, and maybe it'll make you feel good too. So everyone feels good. And I like that. I kind of like that. I like to feel good. I like to feel relaxed whenever I can. So until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great, relaxed writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.